But shocking games with crazy twists and turns or unexpected things happening aren't the only experiences that are amazing on that first playthrough. Because another great example is the games that hit a different chord entirely, one of scale, wonder, and imagination. The games that are home to worlds that capture a sense of adventure, the worlds and universes that come to life that first time around, when everything around each corner is new and exciting, and the universe's secrets are still shrouded in mystery. Worlds like the Outer Wilds. Maybe one of the most impactful indie games of all time, and also one of the most celebrated with a die-hard fan base, The Outer Wilds is an experience unlike anything else out there. And that's not because it has crazy twists or reveals, it's because The Outer Wilds gives us what a lot of us want most in our games. A world to truly explore and get lost in. One where you must slowly unravel the secrets of the fabric of the universe itself and uncover just what's out there. Because in Outer Wilds, every day begins with you only having 22 minutes until the sun goes supernova and engulfs the entire galaxy, meaning you and everyone else in it. You must frantically travel from planet to planet and piece together each puzzle in this world slowly in order to figure out how to stop it. And through each run of the simulation of sorts, you learn more and more about how each planet works and how to time things perfectly in order to get to where you need to be. At the start of the run, one planet might be completely covered in sand and unexplorable, but in the final minutes of that loop, it will have had all of its sand siphoned off its crust and reveal to you an entirely new location to explore. And it's that sense of exploration and discovery that makes the game so special. I'll never forget on my first playthrough landing on an icy comet hurtling through space, and as it approached the sun on its trajectory, the ice melted away and I fell into a secret cavern beneath, which was holding some of the biggest secrets of all. It's things like that that make the first playthrough of this game so magical. When you don't quite know what's going on, and all that's out there is endless planets and places to uncover. And in each of them, depending on the time you go, and even where you have been before, you will start to unearth a grand mystery of epic proportions. Unlike so many other open world exploration games that focus so much on side quests or random meaningless content, everything in the Outer Wilds is in service to its main goal of crafting a world that you must solve on your own. One that at its core is hiding a message so powerful and meaningful that you owe it to yourself to play this amazing game, especially for the first time. Because while I personally find so many issues with the actual core gameplay loop and mechanics of this beloved gem, I can't deny that hiding beneath it all is a story and adventure that is so optimistic and hopeful that it can light a fire in our souls like nothing else. An adventure about venturing into the unknown, into a universe doomed to die every 22 minutes, and yet through it all, discovering that maybe despite the endless death and despair, there's still so much beauty out there and so much to love. Pure ambition in the face of utter nihilism. And the first playthrough of this game is so powerful because more than any other game in history, The Outer Wilds talks to this nomadic swashbuckler in all of us, a calling in our hearts that beckons us to explore the great unknown and go to places that our minds could only dream of. The first playthrough of Outer Wilds is unlike anything else out there and perfectly captures what real exploration should be all about in a universe teeming with passion and care. If you haven't already, treat yourself to one of the most memorable initial playthroughs you will ever have in a game and one of the most impactful worlds in the medium. And speaking of impactful worlds, Outer Wilds isn't the only initial playthrough that will last with you forever. Because sometimes, instead of looking up into the stars for an adventure, we can instead turn our attention the opposite direction, downwards, towards the deepest and most mysterious parts of any sufficiently advanced planet, the ocean, and the beauty and horrors it hides deep within its waters. And what better way to explore this foreboding character of sorts than Subnautica? It's seldom a first playthrough of a game has left such an impact on me, and in Subnautica's case, that impact came from the world, and the unbelievable places and things you unravel. What starts as a traumatic crash landing on a faraway planet quickly turns into an almost all underwater adventure where you will find yourself swimming in vibrant and happy coral reefs and dark and foreboding empty expanses of hellish void alike. But throughout it all, at the core of this game continues to be that exploration, that eerie sense of dread you get around every corner or moist cavern, and the immense satisfaction you get from discovering a new and beautiful location teeming with life deep beneath the waves. And on that first playthrough specifically, there just isn't anything else out there quite like Subnautica. Not only is the exploration and locations in the game very unique because of the setting, but how progression is handled even itself is perfect. On that first go around, you'll be focused on finding new schematics for buildable machinery to help you go deeper. You will be building bases in any location you see fit in order to have a place of safety in some of the scariest locations in game, and if you tread too far, you will start to hear the haunting screeches and screams of massive leviathan creatures that stalk their prey, including you. So few games manage to so elegantly capture a sense of uneasiness and excited anticipation at the same time, where you will always feel like you are being watched and stalked, but that feeling only drives you to push further and discover what's out there. And because of how many varied and unique locations there are in game, it feels like you're always stumbling upon something new that, especially the first time around, is amazing to just swim around in and admire, like the mushroom forest full of massive and anxiety-inducing flora and fauna, or the volcano zone with its piercing bright reds. You know, I was never a big fan of survival games. I always found them mundane, tedious, and if I'm being candid, pointless and a waste of time without friends. But Subnautica completely changed that for me, because that first playthrough was so powerful, the world so engrossing that I couldn't help but get lost in its trance. And the survival elements in the game became something I began to love because it only added to the immersion in a world I was already consumed by. It's one of those first playthroughs that anyone even remotely interested in games needs to do, because not only are there no other games like it, but also Subnautica and its world really do capture an idea of adventure that is so pure. If you haven't already, you need to play and beat Subnautica, one of the greatest game worlds out there. In gaming, there are a select few handful of studios that year over year, decade over decade, continue to create experiences that live in our hearts and souls forever. And one of those acclaimed studios that recently has seen some trouble, but without a doubt has created some of the most memorable games of all time, is Bethesda Game Studios. And as all of those who have played a Bethesda game know, your favorite is also always your first. Because Bethesda games live and die on that first impression. That first playthrough when you get to step out into a world you have never seen and look out at a mountain in the distance or a building that was skinned alive surrounded by a desolate wasteland. Those step-out moments in Bethesda games are so important because they're an analogy to the adventure ahead, hundreds of hours of new discoveries in a faraway land. But for me, the best Bethesda game to experience first is obviously my own biased pick, and the first game I played, The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I'll never forget the first time coming out of the sewers under the Citadel, surrounded by dark and damp environments full of rats and goblins, and stepping out into a sunlit and sprawling meadows and mountains covered in trees. Even to this day, with the now dated graphics, the style and awe of Oblivion is still unmatched, even from other more recent Bethesda games in my opinion, because Oblivion was a world and game full of love and pure adventure. Behind every cave was a story, and every town was a strange encounter, and behind every murder, a Dark Brotherhood member standing above your bed. But most of all, that first playthrough of this game is the type that will make you fall in love with the game's medium altogether, because I know it did for me. And you know why I think Oblivion has the most memes of any Bethesda game? It's because more than any others on that first playthrough, it was so memorable and unforgettable the things that would happen, like meeting the adoring fan and having him follow you and annoy you everywhere you go, until having him meet his unfortunate end. Discovering the Citadel and arena for the first time, fighting your way through massive monsters to a screaming and cheering crowd egging you on. Unearthing the secrets of the Grey Fox and the Thieves Guild, or speaking with a ghost aboard a deserted pirate ship at dock. The game is so full of love and care in a way that is reminiscent of how games were made at the time, with smaller team sizes and less scope, but a strange sense of grandeur despite all of that. And listening to that unforgettable music roar as you make your way through a canyon to a new quest objective, or hearing the sounds of a meandering river nearby with deer feasting at its edges, it's what makes that first playthrough of any Bethesda game so powerful, and why these games are so beloved in the first place. And for any gamers out there, you owe it to yourself to experience a Bethesda game for that first time, without a doubt, something so unique to this entire medium. But sometimes the best worlds aren't ones from storied and legacy franchises, but rather entirely new IP, ones that manage to create worlds that on that first playthrough inspire emotions only the best of art could. And speaking of which, Death Stranding might just be one of the most impactful and memorable playthroughs I have ever had of a game. Because while the journey is far too boring and slow for many people, there is a magic hiding beneath it all that's hard to explain in words alone if you just give it a chance. That sense of wonder you get as you make your way to the top of a rigid mountain and peer out into the distance to see Port Knot City, and mesmerizing music from the game's soundtrack starts to blare through your speakers. While other games tend to focus on engaging gameplay or endless set pieces, Death Stranding is all about going slow and taking in everything around you. Most of the gameplay consists of nothing more than just walking from one location to another, while trying not to trip over yourself carrying hundreds of pounds of supplies and goodies. And the reason it all comes together so masterfully on that first playthrough is that there are just so few experiences out there like this one. I can't stress enough how powerful some scenes in this game are. When you discover a new location and a massive rainstorm starts to roll in as you run for cover, listening to the utterly captivating soundtrack as the sun sets above, or struggling to remain quiet as you make your way through a shallow river being chased by an unknown and invisible force out to kill you. Because it's moments like this which really make you just step back, take a deep breath, and revel at the journey you're going on. And it's during that first playthrough specifically that these scenes hit the hardest, like discovering the secrets of the world and what happened, why so much of the world is dead and destitute in the first place, and what little hope still lies at the center of it all. The story is as weird and vast as the world itself, and uncovering all the mysteries and beauty beneath all of it makes every second of that first playthrough so engaging. Because despite how weird the world and narrative can get, it's all grounded in something that couldn't be further from weird, that innate sense in all of us to gravitate towards the alluring and slower parts of life. That voice in our heads screaming just to slow down and take it all in, enjoy the ride. And I look back so fondly on my initial playthrough of Death Stranding because despite the lack of more meaningful gameplay consistently, just walking through blades of grass and staring off at a giant icy mountain in the distance provides its own sense of splendor too. The type of world that can only be fully appreciated and admired that first time around because of how much it relies on the shock factor of it all, along with the vastness of an open space. So if you haven't already, at least give Death Stranding a shot, because it's the type of experience that while it might not work for everyone, if it does work for you, it will give you a sense of wonder that will last with you for a lifetime. A sense that sometimes games can be so much more than just shooting galleries with a focus on fun, but rather deep, introspective journeys into our soul. In my opinion, what real art, and coincidentally, most of my favorite games of all time, are all about. But not every game world is great because it's beautiful from an aesthetic standpoint. Some are great because they are beautiful from a mechanical one too. And no game world shines more on a mechanical level than Baldur's Gate 3. Based on the original beloved series from the 90s, Baldur's Gate 3 takes place in the Dungeons and Dragons realm of Faerun, and the map isn't the only thing they share. Because more than any other game in history, Baldur's Gate 3 gives us the closest thing to the experience at a real Dungeons and Dragons table. At so many points in the game, you will be met with situations where you ask yourself, what if I did this? And in almost every one of those situations, the game radically realizes you, meaning there is a believable reaction for each and every action you take. Who you choose to ally with and against can drastically change how things play out later in your playthrough, and entire sections of the game can just be skipped over because you simply didn't look behind a secret bookcase in a mystical tower. It's a game that really puts the role-playing back in role-playing games, where even the class and race you pick can fundamentally change how you play the game entirely. For example, on one playthrough I did as a gnome wizard, I discovered I was able to sneak into a small hole in the Druid's Grove I was blocked from before, and inside was a sprawling network of children that were forming their own thieves guild of sorts. On other characters, I was too tall to fit through, so I completely missed out on all of this story and lore. In another playthrough, I picked a drow sorcerer, and because of my race and their reputation as being ruthless underground killers, every time I met a goblin, they simply would power and let me through, instead of fighting me non-stop, making the entire first part of the game so much easier than before. And everywhere you go in Baldur's Gate, the game radically reacts to you just like this. The decisions you make, even from the moment you hit the character creation screen, become absolutely pivotal to how your playthrough and the story will progress. And maybe more than any other game I've played, there are so many secrets, so many legendary weapons, or strange things to find. It truly is rewarding just exploring and figuring out the environment. On top of this too, for me, the biggest strength of Baldur's Gate 3 is how it combines not only great RPG mechanics together, but also with a healthy dose of the immersive sim genre, my favorite of all time. There are so many spells in game that you can use in genius ways even outside of combat, like an invisibility spell to sneak past encounters, flying to get up to high to reach places, turning into a gaseous form to move your way through pipes in a building, or being able to read the minds of other characters while you talk, making speech checks much easier. The depth on offer here is what makes it so special, and figuring out all of the complexities on top of the amazing characters and story just adds so much to the journey and the world. And because of the turn-based nature, everything here is so much more tactical than other games. And while I understand why so many people have trouble at first getting into this style of gameplay, trust me when I say it's this type of experience everyone needs to try for the first time. Because it's in that first playthrough of Baldur's Gate that you can really uncover the magic that is so everlasting. Figuring out cool things that you can do with spells, or all the decisions you can make in the story with a branching narrative, like even having sex with a bear. All the different classes and races that stem from one of the most storied games of all time, Dungeons & Dragons. And more than anything, everyone should experience this game because whether or not you are a D&D veteran or a complete newbie like myself, it will make you fall in love with this universe, and even better, this type of game, and in many ways is a gateway into finding more hardcore role-playing experiences just like it. In my opinion, it's the greatest RPG ever made, and one that will surely inspire generations to come. So if you are still on the fence about trying this for the first time, trust me and give it a couple of hours to figure out why it's so special, even if it doesn't initially seem like a game that you would be into. But maybe the one genre of games that everyone needs to experience at least once in their life the most is MMOs. From the originals like EverQuest, Ultima Online, and RuneScape, to modern classics like World of Warcraft, this genre provides an experience that can't be matched by any other games out there because of their scale and communities, along with how it all comes together. I'll never forget that first time I ever loaded up World of Warcraft as a kid, created a blood elf named Dranix, and started off on my first ever adventure. That sense of scale and immersion you get when you first are thrown into the world, seeing the trees that reach into the sky, all while hundreds of players around you were doing the same quests and objectives. There really isn't anything else out there like MMOs, and what would otherwise be fairly generic quests and stories become so much better when you start to meet and group up with others. Because you see, in MMOs, that first playthrough, that first time you play, isn't so special because the games necessarily do anything better than most other games. If I wanted good combat, I would go play the Souls games. If I wanted something competitive, CSGO and Valorant. And if I wanted to hate myself, League of Legends and Dota. But MMOs offer something much different than that. They offer the opportunity to form real relationships with other people in massive communities and guilds, where the focus of your playthrough isn't always just beating a big boss, but rather the politics and social dynamics that took place in your guild while you did. The best part of a raid in World of Warcraft when I was growing up wasn't finally beating a boss, it was stealing all the loot after and watching the hysterics ensue. And funny or memorable moments like this are only really possible in such massive multiplayer games like MMOs, where the fact that so many other real people rather than lifeless NPCs fill the world. It's that social aspect behind MMOs that make them so special. And the reason everyone needs to play at least one MMO at some point in their lives is it's just a fun way to meet friends, make memories, and experience something most other games can't even offer. And on top of that, there's a sense of scale in so many MMOs like World of Warcraft that is staggering. Opening up your map in WoW for the first time and realizing just how much is out there to explore is daunting, but in a good way. And because of all the major cities and towns scattered throughout the landscape, there's so much opportunity to meet people that will make your journey all that much better. Sadly though, if I'm being honest, this genre has struggled over the past couple of years. With little interesting innovation and so many resources needed, it feels like MMOs just don't have the the same magic they used to. And that's because these games have lost a focus on forcing players to come into contact with the community, rather than just playing by themselves like it's a single-player RPG. Newer things like PAX Day and Ashes of Creation may fix this, but I personally don't think so. I think a new type of MMO needs to come around and completely mix up this genre, rethink every single system, and from the ground up put an emphasis on player interaction and community, the things that make an MMO special in the first place. Like, for example, requiring people to maintain and upkeep their housing, needing guards for your stuff that all must be other players, and a world so dangerous that you can't get anywhere without forming clans to protect one another. But regardless of all of that, MMOs as a genre still have so much that makes those first playthroughs memorable. And even to this day, adventuring through something like World of Warcraft for the first time is almost a rite of passage for understanding why this genre needs a renaissance so badly.